Story 1. The Romans figured out how to make heated floors. Central heating sounds like a modern invention, but apparently it has been around for 2,000 years. Story 2. You know those fun universe animations that start out with the Earth or maybe something on Earth, then zoom out bit by bit, comparing us to something larger in the universe? Then it keeps going. You cannot see Earth anymore, but you can focus on the sun. Then the sun is gone. We keep getting smaller because we have not reached the biggest object yet. Smaller and smaller. We barely even exist. But I complain about the drive to Dallas. Story 3. I was raised as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When I learned how much was copied from the Freemasons, I began looking at non-church sources for information. Finding out your whole life has been a lie is a hell I wish on no one. Story 4. My son is 5 now, and I still look at him dumbfounded at times. Like I made you, you grew inside of me, and now you exist with your own consciousness and continue to grow. Crazy. Story 5. Some people do not have an inner monologue or voice, and some people literally cannot picture things in their minds. Story 6. There is no way to know for sure if you and any other person see the same color when looking at the same thing. Story 7. My physicist husband claims that there are infinities of different sizes. Apparently, many mathematicians believe that as well. How is that possible? Story 8. The double-slit experiment. Even when you slow the experiment down so that it is only a single photon or electron being measured, you still see the interference pattern. Unless you place your detector behind the slits, then it is a solid set of 2 lines behind the slits. It is almost like the universe is rendering itself differently based on observation. Story 9. Everyone you know or have met has a different version of you in their minds. Their perceptions are based on their interactions or impressions of you. No one sees you exactly the same way. Story 10. When measuring a coastline, the smaller the unit of measurement, the longer it appears. Story 11. Chicago's parking meters are paid out to a foreign country for the next 50 years. Story 12. I read that we can only see about 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum, meaning we are practically blind to most of what is going on around us. It made me question how much of reality is hidden from us, existing beyond what our senses can perceive. Another fact that surprised me was learning that trees can communicate with each other through underground fungal networks, sharing nutrients and even warning each other about threats. Completely changed my understanding of forests. They are not just a collection of individual trees, but more like an interconnected community working together. Reality suddenly seemed much more complex. Story 13. These were both from when I was relatively young, 7 or 8, and obviously as a result of the religious environment I was raised in. 1. There are religions other than Roman Catholicism. I thought Roman Catholicism was just what everybody did. 2. People actually believe their religions are true. I thought that everyone else was just going along with things for whatever reason, as I was, because even as a kid, none of it made sense. I quickly learned that questioning things just got you in trouble, so I did what I was told. Story 14. Octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. What kind of alien sea creature is that? Story 15. Most matter is made up of empty space. The distance between the nucleus of an atom and the electron is extremely large. If the nucleus were the size of a ping-pong ball, the electron would be about 2 miles away. Story 16. It is literally impossible to describe, in words, what quantum superposition is. Everything you have heard about quantum superposition is, at best, partially correct but also often wrong. We do not have a proper way to describe it, so those simplified explanations, such as Schrödinger's cat or the idea of being both and neither at the same time, persist because without understanding the mathematics, it is impossible to fully grasp quantum superposition. Quantum reality is fundamentally different from macroscopic reality. Our intuition cannot comprehend what is happening. I do not understand quantum superposition, and unless you are a theoretical quantum physicist, neither do you. Some of them do not understand it either. However, we know it is real. It happens. It affects reality. We cannot adequately convey what is happening using words. That deeply challenges me. Story 17. I read once that the arrangement of molecules, cells, or atoms looks very similar to the way galaxies and clusters look. This made me think that perhaps our universe is just a subatomic thing within something larger, like a fly in a cat's tail. Imagine that. Story 18. Light does not experience time. From its departure from a quasar at the far end of the universe to a sensor on a space telescope built a decade ago, the journey took almost the entire lifespan of existence. Yet, for the photon, the trip was instantaneous. If that is not remarkable enough, consider this. There is no such thing as a free photon. Photons only exist as carriers for energy exchange between electrons. For a photon to exist, there must be a sender and a recipient. Two electrons separated by the entirety of space and time somehow agreed to exchange a photon. Story 19. Quantum entanglement occurs when particles light-years apart react instantaneously when one is affected. We live in a world of magic and wonder. Story 20. Just learned today that if a photon enters a cloud of atoms that are cold, it can leave that cloud before it enters. Negative time. Story 21. What is reality without any mind to see? Is it just atoms and electrons? What are the characteristics of these ultimate particles with no mind? Story 22. Read Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning. It made me question every decision I have ever made. Story 23. When you do a proper shuffle of a normal 52-card deck, the resulting order of the cards has nearly a 100% chance of being the first time that order has ever occurred in the history of the universe. Story 24. Learning at around 30 years old that judgment has always been spelled that way. Sure, Jan. Story 25. Rabbits do not have toe pads. Their toes are covered with soft fur. Story 26. How big the universe is. Conversely, how small the smallest building blocks of the universe are. Story 27. Approximately 97% of the observable universe is already beyond our reach, even with light-speed technology. Story 28. After reading some of these comments, I can honestly say I am questioning whether I have a functioning brain. What I do know is that I do not understand 99% of the comments. Story 29. My senior 6 chemistry teacher, equivalent to 13th grade, finished one of our final lessons and said, "Of course, we don't actually know that atoms and molecules exist. It all just fits with the models we've built so far." I realized that no human has ever actually seen an atom. Also, more philosophical, I was studying philosophy at university and learning about David Hume's bundle theory of identity. He asked if a boat was refurbished plank by plank. Would a boat that was 100% refurbished actually be the same boat? What about a church that was burned down and rebuilt? Same name, same location, same parishioners. Same church? Is an old man who cannot remember his actions as a child the same person as the child whom he now cannot remember? Basically, it made me realize how situational we are as people. The man I am in bed with, my significant other, is not the man I am leading my team, is not the man I am on Reddit. Story 30. Not really a fact but a feeling. I was raised in a religious setting, so the question became, if God made everything, who made God? I used to spiral into these thoughts, like, how does the universe exist? Where did everything come from? How is it possible to exist? Nothing can exist. I eventually learned about dimensionality and accepted that whatever the answer is, I have no capacity to understand it anyway. Story 31. Performing oral stimulation on oneself would feel different from receiving oral stimulation. Story 32. A large percentage of people do not actually have an internal voice. Some research suggests it is between 30% and 50%. Many people do not realize they do not have it because they still have an inner voice, but it is just imagery, not an actual voice. For instance, one subject did all the same tests as people with an inner voice. It was not until the researcher gathered more information that they found out this man's inner voice was just colored shapes. The man thought this was normal as his brain deciphered these shapes the way our brain does with the actual inner voice we have. Basically, there are millions of people who are asked, "Do you have an internal monologue?" And they all answer yes, even though it is non-auditory. Story 33. Apparently, schizophrenia can affect anyone at any time, and using psychoactive drugs such as lysergic acid diethylamide and psilocybin mushrooms significantly increases the chances of developing schizophrenia. To keep it brief, it is reasonable to suggest that many religious and philosophical figures of the past may have experienced schizophrenia, as numerous religions and metaphysical questions before the advent of science were based on visions, voices, and general signs that inspired their teachings. This raises interesting questions about how reality and unreality are matters of perception. Story 34. That we discover the next thought we have. We are literally in a constant state of discovery. There is no choice, only discovery. Story 35. Your tear ducts are connected to your nose and throat, meaning you can actually taste things by putting them in your eye. Apparently, everyone knew this except me. It is also why you get a runny nose when you cry. Story 36. You can never believe in Adam. They make up everything. Story 37. I do not know about reality, but learning about the damage caused to our brains by leaded gasoline made me question free will. Generations of people all over the world lost intelligence quotient points along with some impulse control and emotional stability. This problem did not disappear. Children's brains are still being poisoned in some areas. Story 38. Pineapples take about 2 years to grow. I thought they popped up like quick little fruits, but no, those things are in it for the long haul. Story 39. If you had a very long stick connected to the moon and you pulled it, the other end would not move instantly. It would take as long as it takes for the speed of sound traveling through wood to reach the moon from Earth for the other end to move as a result of your pulling the stick. What strikes me about this is that I knew everything I needed to know to reach this conclusion on my own, but I had never thought about this specific hypothetical scenario before. When you actually write it out like that, it feels counterintuitive, even though I intellectually understand all the components that make it true. Story 40. Black holes were a concept before Australia was colonized by Europeans in 1783 and 1788. Story 41. From my high school and college, only academic failures went into politics. They chose their sides based on where the vacancy was at the moment. Story 42. It may be the case that the universe goes on forever in all directions and it is just as full of galaxies as what we see around us, and that there is no center. There are infinite versions of Shakespeare, and one of them wrote a play about monkeys. He called it Monkbeth. That could be literally true. Story 43. Brain-eating amoebas are everywhere, and the only reason people do not constantly die from them is that it is very difficult for them to enter our bodies through the nose. Story 44. I remember watching a video on how the universe might end. It was a 30-minute time lapse of what occurs from the Big Bang to the end. Earth's entire existence from beginning to end was not even a minute before it formed and burned out. It really felt insignificant just trying to comprehend the time frame of the universe. Story 45. By adjusting time zones, you can make a day last between 1 and 2 hours less. Story 46. The consciousness lag occurs when your mind subconsciously decides on a particular choice a fraction of a second before you consciously make it. We might be more predictable than we think, I suppose. Story 47. The birthday paradox is a fun topic. I wouldn't say I question reality as I am a math nerd, but it's enjoyable to share with people who aren't so inclined. For those unaware, it deals with the probability that 2 randomly chosen people from a larger group share the same birthday. You only need a room of 23 people for that probability to be greater than 50%. With 50 people, it becomes 97%. To explain further why this seems surprising or impossible for most people when they first hear it, people often confuse the premise probability that 2 randomly chosen people share a birthday with probability that 1 other randomly chosen person shares my birthday, which is not the same calculation. Story 48. Dogs might not always be happy, which saddens me greatly. Story 49. Human comprehension of reality is so far from accurate it is functionally useless. Every understanding, scientific discovery, or creation is at best just us trying to make things make sense to ourselves. Humans do not have the brain power or hardware to come anywhere close to an actual understanding of reality. It is like an ant walking on an iPhone. Its brain can process things like, this surface is smooth, and there is no food here. And that is about as complex as it can get. but that is nowhere near the level of complexity of the iPhone itself. Story 50. Unidentified flying objects and unidentified aerial phenomena are acknowledged by the United States government, and Congress is currently debating legislation about whether or not to declassify information related to them. This information has been kept hidden by top-secret defense programs since 1947. This situation has been spurred by multiple whistleblowers, whose information was recently leaked by the Inspector General's office. They made astonishing claims under oath before Congress, such as exotic meaning not of this earth, materials being in the possession of defense contractors. Even more incredibly, non-human biological material has been recovered from crashed unidentified aerial phenomena. All of it seems unbelievable and very well might be complete nonsense, but the attitude of our elected officials, who have been privy to more information than we have, suggests that there is more to it all. Story 51. The word silent has the same letters as listen. It is amazing how these two words are connected. Story 52. When I found out that space is not actually silent but full of unusual radio waves and cosmic sounds, I realized space is not the peaceful void we thought it was. Story 53. Rock beats scissors. Sure, I get it. Scissors beats paper. Again, makes sense. Paper beats rock. What? That's some serious we live in a simulation situation. Story 54. Almost everything you see, hear, and read every day is engineered so that you will see it deliberately, to make you feel like you formed opinions, wants, and thoughts yourself. Once you start getting into content planning, search engine optimization, advertising, brand management, and similar fields, you begin to realize that it is all manipulated. I cannot begin to express the extent to which everything is manipulated. Awards, information, culture, diets, how you feel about yourself, what you think you should spend money on. That company or brand you see in all the good publications. Paid for, not earned. Nothing is earned anymore. It is manipulated and paid for. Focus on truly cultivating peace of mind outside the realm of brands, consumption, and advertising. Story 55. The results of the 2016 United States presidential election have definitely made me question reality. Story 56. Saw this on Reddit last week. It blows my mind and I'm lost. In your car, you can reach from the driver's seat to the passenger door, though you might have to lean. However, you cannot be on the left-hand side of a bus and reach across to touch the right-hand side of the bus. Both vehicles fit in a single lane on the road. Story 57. Strawberries are not actually berries, but bananas are. What even is life? Story 58. Something is wrong with our fundamental understanding of physics because the space phenomena, dark matter, and black holes do not behave the way mathematics predicts. We are basically as clueless as Aristotle. Story 59. Our brain backdates movement, so it seems like we decided to do things. For example, your hand reaches out for a piece of popcorn. Moments later, you have a thought to grab that piece of popcorn. Your brain rearranges your perception so that it seems you thought about grabbing the popcorn before you reached for it. Story 60. Aphantasia. I was nearly 40 when I learned that I experienced this condition and that it is not the default experience for most humans. I always thought that people were speaking metaphorically when they talked about picturing something or using their mind's eye. I had assumed, or rather never questioned, that we all experience our thoughts and sensory inputs in a similar way. Story 61. There are over 10 years of peer-reviewed science on precognition, or seeing the future, that is replicable and anyone can learn to do it. Story 62. Photons do not experience time. A particle might travel billions of light years from a star to your eye, but for that particle it is instantaneous. Story 63. Whoever spends more money on their lawyer wins in court. The truth does not matter. Only who argues better. Story 64. The left and right hemispheres of your brain perceive the world in completely different ways. The left hemisphere's understanding of the world is often false and, in some senses, delusional. If you are interested in learning more about this topic, read Dr. Ian McGilchrist's work. It will change the way you view yourself and the world. Story 65. The double-slit experiment and the fact that the moon is the exact size and distance from the Earth for us to see the corona during an eclipse both make me question reality. The double-slit experiment is unexplainable. The moon's size and distance is just too much of a coincidence. Story 66. Grass is invasive and more like a parasite than greenery. Also, money is not real value. Monarchies invented it to prevent being overthrown by people who owned less or no land. Stop pretending money and social class are real. At this point, we are just polishing our chains in front of each other. Story 67. Everything is made of atoms, and atoms are made of 99.99999% of nothing. Story 68. Everything in the whole world, solar system, stars and galaxies, and the wider universe was once compressed down to something smaller than a single atom. Story 69. Betty White was alive at the same time as Thomas Edison. Story 70. Think of the number of people photobombing your photos or appearing in the background. Consider how many strangers' photos you might be in without knowing it. They have captured a moment of you in time. Story 71. Simultaneity is not real. In simple terms, two events cannot happen at the same time because of relativity. No matter how you try to measure it, it is impossible to frame two events as happening together consistently. There will always be a reference frame in which the two events did not occur at the same time. Physics is strange. Story 72. I am unsure how factual it is, but hearing is the last sense to cut off when we die. This could be both good and bad. I would want to hear something nice before I fade out of existence forever. Story 73. Quantum computing sounds like bad science fiction on paper, but it is real and actually works, although it is too impractical to use on a wide scale. Story 74. There are places in the universe where, even if we could travel at the speed of light, if we left Earth and traveled toward that point, due to the speed of expansion of the universe, we would never be able to reach it. If we turned around and tried to return to Earth at light speed, we still would not be able to reach it. We would essentially be stuck in a continuous, unending space voyage. Story 75. Man accomplished flight in 1903, then less than 60 years later, we went into space. There has not been a similarly significant human endeavor since to that extent in the 60 years following. Story 76. When we talk about the world or reality, as in that is how the world works, that is just the reality of things, we are not referring to the world or reality in an objective sense, but rather our own idea, understanding, and interpretation of these concepts and what they mean to us. Story 77. I learned in elementary school that we climbed Mount Olympus and there were no gods, unlike what Greek religions had said. Since then, I have never believed in the idea of a god or creator. If the Greeks were wrong then, we are wrong today. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.